Hello, and welcome to the Physical Therapy Owners Club podcast. I'm Nathan Shields, and I've got a returning guest today, Tom Dalonzo-Baker, the one, the only, the famous Tom Dalonzo-Baker. Thanks for joining me again today, man.
Thanks, Nathan. I appreciate it. Always love talking with you.
Yeah, you've been on a couple of times in the past, and I highly recommend people go back and listen to those episodes because you share your story and you had some great insight into your, as a PT owner, and the systems you put in place, right? I still recall, and I share with it on a regular basis. Do you know the guy, Tom Dalonzo-Baker? He shared with me a story about how his front desk person was amazing, wanted to work from home. Actually, do you remember that?
I do.
Of course. She was able to not only get them scheduled for their initial evaluation, but schedule their full plan of care before they even walked into the clinic from her home. I think that's just an amazing story. I tell that all the time.
Yeah, she had an 85% success rate of just going through, and people thought it was impossible to do. And I said, no, she's getting bothered and talked to so much at the front desk in the clinic. And yeah, it was crazy.
Yeah. And it's that kind of stuff that makes me really value bringing you on and sharing your experience and wisdom to the listeners, because you found ways to really systematize processes and get a continuity of care across multiple therapists. And there was you being a math teacher in the past, you developed formulas and methods to your physical therapy practice that allowed for really consistent results and a greater number of results for the patients, a greater percentage of success, if you will, for your patients. And so I really want to talk about that today and tap into your knowledge base and your experience. Talk to me a little bit about what inspired you to start developing these methods and how you went through that process, and maybe people can or learn from your experience.
I guess my mind works. I'm always trying to make things, I used to say easier, but I think smoother. And I'm trying to be inclusive on things. And so, this episode, I guess I'd like to hammer into, sometimes owners don't realize, or maybe they do, maybe it's just me, is that like I used to take my therapist and we'd go out and they'd take techniques and take techniques and take techniques. But it never really fully got us all together on the same page. It didn't create the culture necessarily or the theme that I wanted. When I was a math teacher, and it was interesting because at 23 years old, they threw all the difficult quote. They said kids in my class, and they weren't smart. They were like, they'd get 65s and stuff. Mm-hmm. And somehow, I think they taught me more than I taught them. But what happened was I realized the result didn't matter. And that sounds kind of crazy in what we do. The result doesn't wait. Everybody's trying to get pain relief. And I said, the pain relief will come. The result will come if we have the right steps going on. Yeah. And so I remember this kid, Danny, would come in and I put like 6 kids or 7 kids up at the board. And I gave them this problem. They had to work through lots of steps. And when I put like 6 or 7 kids up, somebody might have 6 steps and 8 and 10, and somebody had 14. And I'd go to the person who had 6 and I'd say, what was it you didn't do that the 14-stepper did? Or what was it you didn't understand? And they'd look and they'd say, that one I did in my head. That one, I didn't even know about it. And oh my gosh, I forgot about that one. They still might have gotten the right answer or something, right? But they were more likely to begin making mistakes or not getting as much success. And when I witnessed it too. My kids had the aha moments probably at the same time that I did. And it was unique because I was like going, oh my gosh. Because what we found out is that if we just kept looking and breaking the steps down, the only thing that we ever made mistakes on, adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing, right? And really, does that make it so that they're stupid or we're stupid if we do that? No, we just made a mistake. It's a small fix. So if there's a 10-step problem, I'm not taking 10 points off. I can go up there and take 1. So when I came over and I was struggling leading my staff, I realized we didn't have a cohesive, and I've been to a lot of courses, and I hadn't seen something that enveloped all techniques.
Like any clinic, if you have multiple providers, you have multiple perspectives. And like you said, multiple techniques. We've all gone to different Con Ed courses. And so you're getting different care from different patients, or maybe.
What if they have to skip between one therapist and then another therapist? And
sure.
Therapist? What is the customer experience looking like? And that kind of, I get uneasy when I see what might be happening. I like being like, what is it called? Pan determined. I can see both sides of the chessboard, what it looks like from my end, what ends up the patient's. And I was like, this isn't smooth. Remember I said I like things easy, but I realized I like things smooth. And I said to my therapist, and I told him the story of the students. And he goes, I don't think you're going to be able to find that. So I'm going to try my best. And I would write things down. I observe them. Why'd you do that? Why'd you do that? Why'd you do that? What'd you do next? What'd you do next? And we really began breaking things down.
Take a shoulder patient and say, why did you do that? What was the results, and what works best for you and what doesn't, that kind of thing?
I was looking for the arbitraries that were said to be there and true and what you had to be doing, like this is the truth. I was looking for the things that we said were the truths that could be analyzed to see whether they really were or not. Okay. It seemed like that's what I was doing, is I stepped through a bunch of more. And I said, well, why'd you do that? Well, I did it. And then everybody was going back to steps. And so what I eventually got to is I got to what became these 5 laws of motion. Okay. And I'll go through them here in a second. And when I did, and I added a couple more things, I was able to create 7 steps that we follow. And it makes it sound like, ooh, 7 steps is a TMR thing, right? And it's the people still think TMR is a technique, and it's not. It's a concept. And what concept is it? It's the scientific method laid out for rehab in the full concept that it should be. Even there's research out there that is not understanding it. And I'll go through it in a second. And you can literally go to number 1. Do I do that or do I do this? Because every one of them just is kind of like hot, cold, right? It's a yes or no. It's all binary, which makes it simple. You can look at it yourself and analyze your own self. How good are you at doing it that way? Have you experienced doing it that way? Where are you completely bottlenecked, or where are you completely blinded to, if there's 4 corners in the room, and this is going to make sense in a bit, and you realize all you've been doing your entire career is looking at that corner, but thinking it's the whole thing, you're going to go, there's no way. Now, when you open it up, what happens is every technique falls under it. Every technique falls under the scientific method. Whether they're fully doing the scientific method relates to how good that technique is being done.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm trying to, I'll take every technique that's out there basically, and I can TMR it or enhance it with a scientific method. So in some ways I tell people, if you're more comfortable, call it the scientific method fully unraveled, rather than having it say I'm doing TMR, because that's another quote looking technique.
Right. Got it.
Right?
Okay. Yeah. So what were the 7 steps?
All right. So we're going to go with the 5 concepts first.
Okay. 5 concepts.
But we're going to call them 5 laws of motion. All right. So what these do is they strip away the complexity that's been added, and you've had to learn and put into, what was it? And he's trying to remember it in the textbook. Because if experimentation is supposed to occur, especially clinical experimentation, you need to know how to experiment. But before I could do that, I had to figure out, how are all these techniques related? Why can Mackenzie go and do a press up to get rid of sciatica nerve, goes from the back and the butt down to the back of the leg, but you can then go to a course the next week, this literally happened with me, and I'm at counter strain, and they take the sciatica patient having the exact same presentation, and they flex them and they get better. So notice there's body positions. There's prone, there's supine, or belly back, right? Well, what if I do sideline? What if I do this? What if I do kneeling on all fours, belly back and sideline? So I said, all right, this is crazy. Guys, to this day, to think that I actually got to this point is kind of mind-blowing looking back at it. But anyway, somehow it came up. Luckily for all my students that kept asking questions, I kept thinking about it. But law number 1 is this. What is the body made of, right, that just we can use as this is the machinery, how the machine's built? And that is tissue. The body's made of tissue. Harder tissue or softer tissue. And that's everything. Mm-hmm. So you got bone, that's the hardest tissue we have in our body. Then we've got, like, say, visceral or organs, it's softer, and muscles are softer, tendons and ligaments are harder. But that's all we have. And so all these 5 laws should be able to, you shake your head and go, that's true. That's true. Laws are things that you can go like, laws of gravity, right? You can drop the pen and say, yeah, that's true. All right. And I'm going to give you 2 things that you can do with tissue. And I'm going to give you 2 things that these 5 things do. So tissue can do what? You can lengthen or shorten tissue. Is there anything else you can do with tissue? You can compress, decompress. But even when you twist it, one part's lengthening, another part's shortening. Okay. Now, I'm not talking about blood, right? You could say call that liquid tissue. I'm not talking about the electricity that runs through the body, all right, and maybe the hormones, but the structural components that hoses or the vessels are made out of, everything else is tissue. Now, once I got to that, I said, oh my gosh, can I build off of that? Okay, so then it became this. The second law of motion. So the first one's tissue can lengthen, shorten, compress, decompress, and you're going to really find out it's either going into yummy or it's going into yucky.
Okay.
It feels yummy or it feels yucky when you move. Deal?
Okay.
All right. The second one is now this. Who's moving you? Who is moving you? Is someone else moving you or are you moving yourself? Got it? So it's clinician directed or patient directed. Now, what that means is obviously clinician directed is manual therapy. Patient directed is motion, okay, that self-generated. Now, we call it exercise. A lot of times people call it corrected exercise, but oftentimes it's still the therapist going, ding, 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 you tell do this, you do this, you do this. Can we make it so they understand how to do their own motion? So that's step number 3. So again, you can pretty much say, yeah, am I a manual therapist? Am I a corrective exercise therapist? So I do a little bit of both. Right? So you need, look, we're inclusive again. I'm not excluding anything. Number 3 becomes who's making the decision? Is it the patient or not the patient? Which means, is it you or is it the patient? Decision of what? Decision of what motion to do. Okay, now it doesn't mean that they're going to come right in and know how to do that, but I'm trying to create that experimentation so that they can truly have the scientific method in front of them. Okay, and then I'm systematically going to take them through how to progress doing the scientific method. All right, so again, number 3 is who's deciding. Number 4 becomes into this. We split the body into 3 parts. Well, actually, no, I'm going to step back from that first. Number 4 is what area are you moving? Okay, so number 4 is what area are you moving? And that is it the injured area or not the injured area? Which means, are you doing injured area or not the injured area, right? Which is the comfortable areas.
Okay.
Non-injured. And the last thing, now, and you have to decide that. You look at your own self. Like, so if I say to you, one patient comes in to see 100 clinicians with right knee pain. Out of the 100 clinicians, what % are going to start working by doing their right somewhere on their right leg? Pelvis, lumbar, leg, knee. This is 100, 90, 80, 70. Hold up your hand. What % of the 100 are going to start on that right leg? Yeah, and I have seminars.
All of them?
Yeah, I have seminars and webinars all the time. I make them do that. I hold up their hands and I go, this isn't my answer. This is your all's answer. And they all say the exact same thing. 100% of them typically, maybe 90%, right? And I said, how many of them go to the left leg to fix that right? 0, 1, 2, 3, 1. Right? Exactly. And I said, how many of them think about going to the left arm to fix that?
0.
Right. How many the right arm? None. And I said, okay. So currently our professional lines say that we must be on our bad side in order to change the bad side. Mm-hmm. Okay. Got it. We have to be on our bad side. So this is a paradigm that we're stuck in. It's a corner of the wall that we're looking at. All right. When there's actually 4 corners, which I'm going to show you in a second. And we've been paying attention to that corner the whole time. So one more question. If we've got, let's say when you learned how to do a joint move and you found that the anterior to posterior was the most restrictive. Out of 100 clinicians, how many would start into treatment doing the thing that's the most restricted? 100, 90.
190.
Yeah, right? So again, a professional thing is that we were taught that. So the question becomes this. why weren't we taught, hey, do that most restricted one, see what the result is?
Mm-hmm.
But we kind of talked up on number one law, that you lengthen or shorten tissue, or you go into what's yummy or yucky, you got yummy or yucky. But when we were joint moving, we also felt what felt the best.
Mm-hmm.
Why didn't we go there and test it with that? Because now we've got the two extremes. What feels the worst? What feels the best? And we never did that. And when you start doing just that, you double the amount you can do in that shoulder, the opportunities you have.
Okay.
Because if all you've ever looked at was doing the right leg, well, here's law number 5. Law number 5 is, what direction are you going in? Are you moving in? Number 5 is, what direction are you moving in? Number 4 was, what area are you doing? The injured or the not injured? Number 5 is, what direction of motion are you going into? Restriction or ease? Now you see that takes away all these planar motions, takes away that we have to think about all this planar motion. Just find what moves well and find what doesn't move well. Okay, so when you go in and you realize, wait a second, I'm only staying on the right side, my next question would be, how many of you, and this may be less, how many of you now find a direction of motion like that joint move that you can't do, and that's what you go into? It's a large, large percent. And I said, so if I just have you now go into what's the easiest direction of motion, you now have a new system. Make sense?
Yes.
Okay, good. So those are the 5 laws: tissue, lengthen or shorten. Who's moving it? They or you? Who's deciding? What area, injured or non-injured? And are you going into restriction or ease? Mm-hmm. Now, every therapist can look at that and say, I suck at going into easy directions. I don't know anything about going into non-injured parts of the body to fix injured parts. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. We all look at that and say, well, I want to be better at that, right? Well, the same system works in it. And so there's one, I don't know what to call these next 2 or 3 things, but I can show how non-injured fixes injured if you'll do one thing, well, 2 things, and that's this. Will you test one thing in the upper body, one thing in the trunk and spine, the spine and neck, and one thing in the legs every single session, and put down what's yucky to score it? So for example, if you'll do, now we do about 2 in the arms, 1 in the trunk and neck, and 2 or 3 in the legs. And we get a full body picture of what's going on in the body every single session. And there's a reason we do that. Because when you do that now, here's what happens. When I now say, when you go to treat, you have an option. Are you going to move them or are they going to move themselves? Okay, good. We decided they're going to move themselves. We're going to do exercise. Okay, good. You're going to do injured or non-injured? Okay, let's just say we're going to do non-injured because we don't know whether that really works. Ease or restriction. Let's say we're going to go into ease. So watch what happens. I go and I test the body. Maybe an arm raise forward, maybe out to the side, maybe a twist, maybe a leg raise and a sit to stand. Left versus right. I'm always comparing left versus right. And what happens is I test the things and I write down. You could use a scale of 1 to 10. We use 1 to 100. But I find 3 motions are 50 and a 70 and a 90. Is that fair? I just know that. So an arm motion that I found was a 50. They've got a trunk side bend that's kind of a 70. And you know what? Their sit to stand really sucks on their left side, and it's a 90. Awesome. Making sense so far?
Okay.
Now, just go and do 2 sets of something with how many reps you're going to do. 2 to 3 sets of something. I don't even care whether it's on the good or bad side, because I'm going to want you to explore both. Mm-hmm. Fair? When you get done, and now all I want you to do is retest what you had found before. I want you to retest the yucky stuff you found before.
In all of the body parts or just the bad stuff?
In the bad ones. I want you to take the bad ones you found and retest now after you did emotion. And what you will learn is, oh my God, here I am in the trunk, and it's changing my arms and it's changing my legs too. Crap, I never knew that. Got a picture of that?
Okay.
You got it? So there I am And I've done one thing to the body. I don't care what it was or how you did it. And now I say to you, now, if you chose to go into restriction and you chose to stay in the injured side, now I'd like you to take the injured side and go into what's easy. And I'd like you now to recheck those things that you found yucky in the body. Okay? And everybody will learn that everything in the body changes everything in the body. Doesn't mean it fixes it. Most of the time, yummy emotions will fix things faster. Okay, and areas of injury into restriction is typically the slowest. There's only two types of tissues that works with. Right? Have I lost you? Or have I kept a picture?
I'm trying to get a picture of what that looks like in a given session.
So what it looks like in a given session is I might do an arm raise, a trunk twist, and a leg raise. And then I might say, oh, but you're here because you have pain walking up steps. Mm-hmm. So I say, all right, so walk up on the right, walk up on the left. Yeah, my right hurts, my left doesn't. Okay, good. Your arm motion, forward arm sucks on the right. Good. When I twist, it hurts to the left. And when I do a leg raise, that's fine. So I've got an arm raise that's yucky. I've got a twist that's yucky on one side. And I've got a going up steps that's yucky. Now I say to you, Nathan, you're used to treating a certain way. Maybe you're going to go and treat that knee. I would like you to go treat that knee whichever way you can. Okay? You go and do it. All right? Let's say you're doing it as a therapist, or you tell them, I want you to do, instead of, I know a 8-inch step hurts you, so let's do a bunch of reps on a 2-inch step or a 4-inch step. So you do it, which means you're going into restriction, right? You're going, and you do it. And now I ask you to retest the arm raise that was a problem, the twist that was a problem, and the knee bent knee, or the going up steps. And you find out you made everything worse. Or you found out one of them got better, two of them got worse. Or maybe you found out they all got better. Mm-hmm. Make sense? Mm-hmm. Now I say, why don't you go over and do something on the good side of the leg? So why don't you take a step up on the left side and see what happens to the right, see what happens in the arm, and see what happens in the twist. And when they do that, that blows people's minds. Because now you're using, I'm going to show you 4 quadrants here in a second, but now you're using the full body. You will begin seeing that, holy crap, legs fix arms, arms fix legs, legs fix neck, fix jaws, twists fix a whole bunch of things. And then all of a sudden, you have a way, because then we have a process that we put on a form, very spreadsheet kind of methodical, systematic form that lays it right out. It just tracks everything. And guess what? I can be an OT working on a leg and working an arm and proving that an arm is fixing the leg, even though, hey, you're not allowed to work arms to fix leg. The only reason you're not is because your form sucks so much. It's not that. Or, hey, my doc gave me a script, said work the legs or do the knee, and you're up in there in the arms. What are you doing up in the arms? Wait, I'm showing every 2 sets what I'm doing and what it's doing to it. Because everything's connected. If the legs are messed up and being pulled down like this, your shoulder won't ever fix to the forward. Okay, so now what would take an aerial view of this, what we have now is a means to create 7 steps. That every single time we treat any condition, we can test the full body first by these FAB6 that we use, pick them, then by the area that they are injured in, right? They didn't come in to do those 6 motions. They came in to do what was their area of injury. We can then score it. We can then treat it. So we got number 1 test, area, my 5-6, which is and then the area of injury, then score it. Then we test. There's 4 ways to treat. Not going to go into those. Number 5 says retest the whole body. That alone will get everybody massively on the same page in the entire profession. If everybody would do the scientific method the way like this, you will be using everything and we'd all get to the same answers. All right. And the number 6 is simply goes, there's 3 rules. One is, what if it gets better? What do you do? What if it plateaus or you fatigue? What do you do? And what happens if something gets worse? A new pain comes on. Something funky happens. That covers everything. There's 1 rule for that. Okay. And then the next one is, when do I get to move to a new exercise, a new motion? And that's it. And does that sound like, look, you could do it manually. You could do it corrective exercise wise. And you have a form that you can look to see if your people are doing it, or you as another therapist looking at another therapist's form can go, I know exactly what they did. The patient can freaking look at the form and the 7 steps and tell what they did. The patient knows those 7 steps and says, I'm doing it. So everybody's almost checking each other up and down the scale. So it's kind of now like an accordion.
Well, I love how you took that and just made it a system for your team. And it's something that I know you put some work into yourself, but you did it with your providers, if I'm not mistaken. Like you sat down and said, okay, how are we going to get on the same page with shoulder pain, a shoulder patient? And what does that look like? And so they can come into it with their own techniques, but there needs to be some similarity and consistency across the board as we're treating.
Yeah. So you can we've taken McKenzie and added more scientific method to it. We've added more of these 5 laws to it. All right. We've taken Mulligan, same exact thing. Mm-hmm. All right. And we'll show you where Mulligan didn't drop the ball. They just didn't see some of the corners. And what I mean by corners, I'm going to make it real simple, is that I'm a math guy. Maybe it's not too simple. Is we live in a 3-dimensional universe. What that means is there's a X, Y, Z axis. Mm-hmm. All right. When there's an X, Y, Z axis, it looks like this. You don't have to remember Z2 and X, but that's kind of the things that I like to do. So you have, here's your nice smiley face, here's your feet, here's your hands. You are 2 quadrants, and so you have an upper quadrant, okay, to the right. And that includes your right shoulder, your right arm, your neck, right, your ribs, and your thoracic. And so if you're treating a right shoulder, you think that's the quadrant you stay in. But most people do it into restriction.
Okay.
Well, you see, guess what? You can also do it into ease.
Right.
So now looking at that picture, there are 2 ways to do everything in each quadrant.
Okay.
So if you've only known how to do the injured quadrant into restriction, you know how to do 1 out of 8 ways. You know how to use 12.5% of the body to fix someone. You don't know how to use into ease. You don't know how to use this side or anything. Mm-hmm. You don't have as many opportunities to solve somebody's problem like I do, or anybody who's taken TMR. So if I give you the opposite side, all of a sudden you see me work in the opposite side, which when I lift this arm up, it shortens this side. When I'm doing the opposite side, I am shortening the one that I'm trying to fix. Mm-hmm. When I'm lifting something up like this, I'm lengthening it. So by giving you ease and restriction over here, you now have you've added 3 more fold ways you can help the patient. And now I give you the whole 8 out of 8, and now you have no problem fixing somebody with the left leg for the right arm. It's not even foreign or odd to you. It's not even foreign and odd to them, because of ways to also address it with the patient. Very simple to say to the patient, hey, look, if we use this into restriction and it gives you this improvement, and then we go into what feels good and it gives this improvement, which one do you want to do? Now, if we come over on this other side, and as I lift this up, it actually shortens this side, and it works better, which one do you want to do? And if I go down to the trunk and I either lengthen this side or I shorten that side, and that one works better, which one do you want to do? And if I go to the leg and I kick it up, which shortens the tissue here, or I kick it back and it lengthens the tissue, and one of those does this much improvement, which one do you want to do? And if I go to this side and it does this much improvement doing it, which one do you want to do? And it all of a sudden breaks them up into this, because culturally we also have, if you have a right knee problem, you think somebody should treat your right knee. So I have to go through that type of cycle to get their brain also opened up to the 4 corners or the 4 quadrants of the body.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
That's a lot all at once.
It is. Yeah. And so for the owners that are listening, for them to take something away from this, maybe if they're not necessarily going down the TMR path, total motion release path, at least be systemic about some thought process and get your providers together to consider what they could do to get on the same page, and start with just looking at the other side and maybe the other quadrants.
Yes, if you can. The thing is, there's been thousands of years have gone on. I can't tell you. I'm not a brain surgeon. I'm not a smart guy necessarily. I don't know why it fell. I'm not sure. Maybe it's because I came from the teaching profession. Maybe because of the way I tried to help my kids and I observed something at a time. This has never been observed anywhere else. Okay. When you begin seeing it, you're going to go, he's right. You're going to see the majority of my people that come to TMR are 15 years out, right?
Wow.
Because they've gone, that's the average person that comes to TMR. They're 15 years out, right? So they've seen all that stuff. And so, yes, the best thing is try going into ease, all right? But you need some other things when you start doing the other side. Once you do and you catch on to it, you as an owner are going to be able to say, and once you have the form, you're going to be able to say, now I know how to bring everybody together, still allow them to treat manual technique, whatever they do, still allow them to mulligan, but we can all be using the same form no matter who comes in. Forget all these other special tests that people are doing or these special forms they're using. Every single condition can be done on one form, which means everybody can see and understand what everybody's doing. So that when you go and say how many people are completing and you're reviewing your charts, guess what? Everybody's reviewing and understanding what everybody else is doing. Right. It adds massive consistency that doesn't exist. So, I always say to people, and I've got a college that's actually now using TMR as their foundation course they teach, so that then they build off of that. And that's what I say to owners. Owners, at least, you guys need to take a TMR, at least level 1, to get the idea. And then I always say, if you come and purchase it like with your staff, I literally will talk about kind of what you and I are talking about. I will take the people who buy as a staff, and I will then say, how now do you create that culture? How do you take somebody from 35% success rate or completing patient to 82% completion rate? So I like to work with those who bring their whole staff involved in. But anyways,
you bring up a key statistic, industry wide, and I know that our success rate on completed plans of care is about 30%, which is horrific. Some of that is because, I guess there could be varied reasons as to why that is, but we're not connecting with the patient, right? And we're not getting consistent results within a clinic. And so whatever we can do to start helping patients and therapists recognize the value of the therapy they're providing will be a great step in that direction. But it is a statistic that needs to be measured if it's not at this time by PT owners.
When we put this in place, it took us 6 weeks to go from a 35% completion to an 82% completion. And then I think we got up between 87 and 88%, which is a pretty darn good completion rate too.
Yeah, and my friend Eric Miller from Econologics, he'll say the money that if you ask people how much what's their biggest cost center, right? And inevitably they'll say, well, salaries, right? That's 50% of my. He said, well, actually, no, your biggest cost center is lost business that you're not capturing. So if you have 200 appointment slots available and you're not filling all 200 appointment slots, that's your biggest cost center. Your growth and expansion and getting the patients to come in for their full plans of care, coming in at the frequency they're supposed to come in on a routine basis. That's your biggest cost center. And so focusing on that more so than your salaries will get you further as a business.
And, that's what we saw is that, we did so much work and, we were at Measurable and stuff too. And a big stat that kept popping up was our completions, right? Completions. And that's when probably one of the big impetus with me is, how do I get them when they're all speaking different languages? Everybody's doing a different technique and really good at this. And I said, how can I make the people who are awesome, awesomer? Is there a connection between it? And I never would have expected it to come out to look like what it did. So.
Yeah, because a lot of times we'll focus on, and even I will as a coach for PT owners, focus on what they're saying at the front desk, which definitely is important. But I rarely talk about what they can be doing in the quote unquote back office and patient care.
Nobody.
So we'll talk about what we can do to engage the patient, get their buy-in at the initial evaluation. But there needs to be that consistent visit after visit after visit, show some value, show some progress, if we're really going to get their buy-in.
When we realized this part of it, it became the center core of our company. Mm-hmm. And then what it allowed, because we could use the good, the bad, the way we're doing it. And then even our therapist took it. Not our therapist, our front desk took the course, right?
Oh,
our
really?
Front desk learned how to do it. So that when they were talking to the person, they'd say, well, what lesson are you on? Right? Where are you in your thing? They could use it to then talk to the patient, because again, they too were able to look at the form and what's going on. I mean, it really is fascinating when you see a process and a methodology. But just like you said, nobody's out there looking at the therapy. We make this assumption they've got the service orientation, they've got the quality. All right, we know that if a VIP walked in the door, who we're really going to give them to, it might be ourselves if we're still in there, or there's a couple. If you can't, I was willing to let we can use techs in North Carolina, and most of ours were athletic trainers or kinesiologists. So I was fine letting my tech do a VIP if it needed to be. That's how good they were because of this. We had some interesting people come into the clinic, and they would only get, a half hour with the therapist and a half hour with the tech. And I had no problem because I knew that we all knew the same stuff going on, and they ended up sending their daughter and their mother. I'm thinking of an NFL guy that we had. So,
well, it's impressive because number one, you systematized the process so that it wasn't just Tom Dalonzo-Baker's physical therapy.
No.
It was blankety blank physical therapy, and whoever you sent there or whoever went there could get consistent care, no matter who the provider was. And it's something that they developed as a team and as a culture. And I really like, and I pointed out that having your front desk person go through some of that is valuable, right? If they can speak the same language, because me doing EMGs, I'm not answering the phones, but my front desk person is answering the phones, and they're getting a lot of questions from potential patients about the care or the test that I'm going to do. If they can't speak the language and they're fumbling over their words, then it's going to be hard for them to sell.
And you remember, we started this with that lady that had 85% success rate of getting people to schedule 12 visits, because right. you should have seen her change with TMR. Her whole body was like, oh, wow. So she could communicate and ask them. I mean, she was into saying stuff like, what's going on with you? And she would say, oh my God, I couldn't twist at all when I was having something going on. You got to see what you're going to do. You're going to do this crazy stuff. Like, I mean, how many people have treated your leg to fix your arm? Well, it's all connected. Why wouldn't they? So she's selling that part of it. And that was the beauty of it. That was every single person knew and could talk. And I didn't feel like, I don't know how many times as owners you feel like that things are pushed in your direction for the more educational part, or the therapists do that are handling things. Handling, oftentimes the front desk can't do it, and they funnel it off, but most of the time our front desk could.
Yeah, and many times the therapist might go through all of that, and maybe you've experienced this. The patient will then turn around the corner and go talk to the front desk and ask the same question. Oh, right? Hoping to get a different
answer. Getting it.
Yeah, exactly. They weren't quite getting it, or maybe they wanted it in layman's terms. And so if your front desk doesn't know what's going on, they're not going to be able to be supportive in that regard.
What do they say? I don't want an answer. I want to hear my answer on your lips.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. And I know that's what you've been preaching this entire time. And it's a lot about what you do really well is you generate systems. And I know this. And after just talking to you a few times on the episodes, is you generate systems and try to make it simple. When things are going wrong, it's like, okay, do we need to change it, or do we need to fix something that went wrong along the way? Right.
Simple and inclusive of typical stuff. So where did you ever think that manual therapy was going to, like, you'll hear techniques, right, kind of fighting between each other. Well, now I know why McKenzie stuff and Williams flexion works. Now I know why Mulligan works and when it stops working, right? And where just by a little flipping of standing on one leg as you do the Mulligan can co-rotate, make that Mulligan work. Those kind of things happen. So that's kind of neat to see as you get out there. So.
That's cool. If people wanted to reach out to you and learn a little bit more, how do they do that?
So my website is kind of set up as a training lesson. So you just go to totalmotionrelease.com and you'll see step one. I show it working on people, right? Crazy stuff. You'll see somebody with jaw and neck pain get better with a sit to stand on the right side or something, right? You'll see eye pain and weird stuff. You'll see a spine surgeon doing a arm press on a fitness piece of equipment to change. Great, cool stuff. Then there's explanation of why is this working? It kind of gives you the 5 laws, right? And then it steps you through. and tells you are you an owner, you want a staff training, or do you want just individual training? So it's all sitting right there on the page. And there's even, you can get 2 free CEUs just by taking our 2-hour web class, which you can take as an on-demand home study. Or
that's cool.
Every couple of weeks I have one live also.
Mm-hmm. Cool. All right. Well, thanks for sharing today. I really appreciate it.
As always, buddy. Thanks for having me on.
Is there anything else you want to share before we take off?
God, I feel like, I hope having all that thrown out at once, maybe people have to watch this a second time because they weren't expecting it. Or maybe you need to watch it with the videos, watch it work a couple times.
Yeah, see it in motion.
Yeah, most people have to see that and go, what the hell? Because you've got to see it. And then when you do, you'll have more to talk to. And so anytime you guys are a clinician like myself, you'll find out that I'm highly accessible. If you go watch something, you go, I got to talk to Tom. My cell phone's on there. Text me and we can get up and chat. So,
all right. Well, cool. Again, thanks for your time today, Tom. I really appreciate it.
All right, brother. Appreciate it, Nathan.